Imagine controlling 90% of a vital global resource. You hold the entire industry in the palm of your hand. Now imagine the highest court in the land tearing your empire to pieces. Logically, that's game over, right? A total crushing defeat. Well, welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to see that history absolutely loves a curveball. We're diving into the staggering story of John D. Rockefeller and the ruthless monopoly he built. Because here's the wild paradox we're unpacking today. The US government completely shattered his life's work in 1911. But, get this, instead of ruining him, that very breakup crowned him the richest private citizen in the history of the world. No way, right? To wrap our heads around wealth that literally defies human comprehension, we can't just look at a business strategy. We need to get inside the mind of a guy who looked at the world as one giant game of total domination. Section 1. Lessons from a con artist. To truly get how the Standard Oil machine was built, we've got to start with the brutal childhood trauma that hardwired Rockefeller's brain. And that brings us to his father. William, or as the locals called him, Devil Bill, was literally a bigamist and a con artist, peddling fake cancer cures. I mean, the guy actually encouraged deception in his own house. He famously told John to jump into his arms and then just stepped back and let the poor kid hit the floorboards. Talk about a harsh lesson. His message was crystal clear. Trust is weakness, and the world is an absolute battlefield. So, abandoned and basically penniless at 16, John develops this intense, almost neurotic obsession with the only thing in his life that never lied to him: numbers. He started recording every single penny he earned as a bookkeeper in a tiny red book. After his dad completely vanished to live a double life, John had to step up as the sole provider for his family. Making a measly 50 cents a day, he tracked his painstakingly slow progress in a notebook he called Ledger A. This wasn't just him doing math, it was his psychological armor against a totally chaotic world. Section 2. Taming the oil chaos. Let's jump forward a bit to 1859. The Pennsylvania oil strike turns Cleveland into this absolute chaotic black gold rush. While most prospectors are out there gambling on completely unpredictable wells, Rockefeller spots a calculated, surefire opportunity in refining. Fast forward to 1865, he's in this incredibly tense private auction trying to dissolve a partnership with a guy who's absolutely terrified of debt. To prove he had the iron stomach to win at literally any cost, a 25-year-old Rockefeller bids what was then a massive, bankruptcy-risking sum, $72,500. His partner completely caves, and Rockefeller takes total control. And he instantly applied that strict Ledger A mindset to the incredibly dirty, messy world of oil. While his rival refiners were literally just dumping toxic byproducts straight into the local rivers, Rockefeller looked at that sludge and saw discarded money. He actually hired chemists to transform that toxic waste into marketable stuff like paraffin wax and lubricating oils. He took it even further, refusing to pay outside vendors. He bought his own timber forests and built his own drying kilns just so he could manufacture his own barrels. It's efficiency on a whole new level. Section 3. Blueprint of a monopoly. Now, for a guy driven by absolute control, competing in an unpredictable market was just completely unacceptable. He envisioned one singular, unstoppable machine that would dictate the terms for the entire industry. So what does he do? He forms a secret railroad cartel built on 3 incredibly ruthless pillars. First up, he negotiates massive shipping discounts, also known as rebates. Second, he sets up an actual spy network where the railroads secretly fed him data on his rivals. But the third, the drawback, this was his most devastating weapon. The railroads literally took a cut of the shipping fees paid by Rockefeller's competitors and handed that cash directly to him. Wild, right? His ultimate checkmate strategy, though, was vertical integration. By buying up the oak barrel makers, the warehouses, and the chemical plants, he effectively cut off the oxygen to his rivals. Even if they could refine the oil, they couldn't store it or treat it. And when independent oilmen actually tried to fight back by building massive pipelines to bypass those railroads altogether, Rockefeller hit them with everything he had: sabotage, legal injunctions, bribery, just to bleed them dry financially. Once they were totally defenseless, he swooped right in and bought their infrastructure for pennies on the dollar. The sheer, terrifying speed of this aggression peaked during this legendary window known as the Cleveland Massacre. Picture this. Rockefeller calmly lays his secret railroad contracts out on his desk and politely explains to these independent owners that their ruin is basically a mathematical certainty.
The choice was simple: take Standard Oil stock or be totally crushed. In under 3 months, 22 of the 26 Cleveland refineries threw in the towel and surrendered.
But how do you rule a massive, fragile empire across state lines? Well, his lawyers came up with a brilliant, albeit super shady, invention: the trust. See, late 19th century American law heavily restricted companies from operating across state borders, making Standard Oil a precarious web of handshake deals. The sinister workaround was transferring the voting power of dozens of these regional companies to a central board of 9 trustees. It essentially created this giant corporate phantom, an untraceable ghost entity that regulators couldn't map out, let alone prosecute.
But here's why all of this actually matters to the everyday consumer. His absolute obsessive perfectionism brought affordable light to the world's poor for the very first time in history. The guy was an infamous micromanager. Once he found out a factory was using exactly 40 drops of solder to seal a kerosene can, he ran experiments and discovered that exactly 39 drops sealed it perfectly without a single leak. 1 drop. But that single drop of saved material, scaled globally, saved an absolute fortune. By driving the price of kerosene plummeting down from 30 cents to just 8 cents a gallon, Standard Oil literally extended the waking hours for the working class.
Section 4. The Anaconda Under Attack.
By the 1890s, our former 50-cent a day bookkeeper was sitting atop 90% of the entire industry. But man, managing a monopoly that controlled nearly 2% of the total American economy was a crushing burden. The psychological toll of waging total, constant warfare actually manifested physically. He lost all his hair, even his eyebrows. The richest man on the face of the earth found himself with a stomach so wrecked he could only eat milk and crackers, living as this reclusive ghost, swapping out a rotating collection of wigs. Meanwhile, outside his New York office, a storm was brewing, and a brand new enemy was sharpening her pen. Meet Ida Tarbell. She was a brilliant journalist who had personally watched Standard Oil systematically destroy her own family's livelihood out in the Pennsylvania oil fields. Through just relentless, grueling journalism, digging through dusty railroad basements for 2 whole years, she managed to trace the invisible threads of the trust. She finally found the hard, undeniable documentary proof of the illegal kickbacks that everyone suspected but no one could ever prove. And then, the ultimate personal scandal drops. While Tarbell was ruthlessly attacking the business, the press went after the man himself. You see, Rockefeller had spent his entire adult life carefully projecting this image of a super devout, austere church deacon. But when reporters suddenly uncovered that his father was actually a bigamist fugitive living under a fake name, that entire facade just crumbled to pieces. It fueled this pure, unadulterated public hatred, and for the first time in his life, the Titan was paralyzed. He had completely lost control of the narrative.
Section 5. The Ultimate Irony.
Tarbell's massive exposés, combined with those personal scandals, created an absolute perfect storm of public fury. And this handed President Theodore Roosevelt the ultimate popular mandate for a scorched-earth antitrust investigation. It all came to a head on May 15, 1911. The U.S. Supreme Court shattered the monopoly into 34 separate fragments. To the journalists, the politicians, and the American public, the beast had finally been slain.
But here is that unbelievable twist we talked about at the beginning. Because the court forced the breakup of the company, but crucially didn't confiscate his equity, Rockefeller just received proportional shares in those 34 new businesses. And right at that exact historical moment, Henry Ford was mass-producing the automobile, completely shifting the world's thirst from kerosene over to gasoline. The combined value of these newly freed independent companies just exploded, rocketing Rockefeller's personal fortune to an incomprehensible $1 billion. Now, facing his final, truly unbeatable enemy, time, he spent his last years desperately trying to scrub the blood off his legacy. Recognizing he couldn't exactly take a mountain of gold to the grave, he kicked off a massive public relations campaign. Sure, he famously handed out shiny new dimes to kids on the street, but way more importantly, he poured the modern equivalent of billions of dollars into higher education and medical science. He essentially created the Rockefeller Foundation and funded research that helped eradicate yellow fever, fundamentally altering global public health forever. So, I'm going to leave you with this thought to chew on. Was John D. Rockefeller a ruthless predator who choked out the American dream? Or was he a brilliant optimizer who basically dragged the entire world kicking and screaming into the modern age? He viewed his insane accumulation of capital not as a sin, but as a literal divine mandate from God to organize chaos, build immense wealth, and then distribute it for the good of mankind. It's a staggering historical paradox. The exact same man who taught the world the brutal art of the corporate monopoly also taught it modern philanthropy. What do you take away from his legacy? Drop your thoughts below and keep questioning the history behind the numbers.